Okay. Okay, so a couple of things. The first one, we need you guys to interact with us. It's very, very hard to manage the lecture without interactions, as I was saying before. So I know that also my colleague Alessandro asked you to introduce themselves, and only a couple of you did that. And for us, it's very, very difficult. If we don't have hello, Winston, so nice to see you as well. For us, very, very hard to manage. We have been working on this for some time. We are trying to implement some simulations exercises, as you have seen yesterday, and as you will see in the next few weeks. We know that nothing can replace an in-presence, a true residential course. We definitely know that. But we can all together try to make these nice and fun, stimulating, and so on. So if we talk with your pictures, it's very, very hard for us, seriously. We definitely need your support. Then I know that you have to reach 75%, so I wouldn't want that you just enter in the meeting room and then you go somewhere else, because if we don't see you and you don't write and you don't talk, we don't know if you are there or you aren't. So we really don't want to start adding rules or making things hard for you guys. But at a certain point, if we don't have any interaction or feedback, we have to assume that you are not there. So please do your best. I'm sure that for someone can be hard to turn the camera on because of internet connection or technical problems, but not everybody. So if I have 18 students with technical problems, you know, it's hard to manage. So those that can, please support us in interacting and making questions to the faculty and so on. Let's create all together a friendly environment where everybody can talk and share. You can also interrupt anytime. All the lecturers are very, very friendly, and even if they have a lot of expertise and they are professionals in their field, they are super, super, super available and nice. So don't be afraid. And just have fun, enjoy this course. So again, how many of you are here now? Like 11. I can't be sure that the students, apart from Rabbi and Winston, are there. So at a certain point, please don't make us doing these things that we need to verify if you are there. Please, please, please. We are not at school, so just support us in this. And I will also write a post on that on the forum. The other thing that I want to stress, please, is to be on time, so we can start immediately and respect the agenda that we scheduled. So this is a general recommendation. Okay, so I hope that someone else will appear at a certain point, but Wilson and Robbie is a very, I'm very happy to. Oh yes, we have Zeking. Hello, sorry for the pronunciation. Oh, it's very, very nice to have an audience. Oh, great, also Victor is here. Great, great. Great, great. I'm super happy. So, and I'm sorry if I have to be I don't want to be rude or something else, but you know, as coordinator, hello Natalie, as coordinator, it's everything on me. So also this aspect I have to manage. So another communication, I'm so sorry for how I will manage this. I'm home with COVID. I don't know if I have some student here home with COVID. Here in Italy, it's a mess. We have a lot of positive cases, not serious, of course. Hello, Mehrbano. Sorry for the pronunciation. If you can correct me, please. Was okay,
Yes, it's Mehrbano. It's okay.
Thank you so much. Hello, it's very nice to see you. Thank you for opening your camera. So I was saying that in Italy, it's a mess. I'm feeling much better, but despite the vaccination, I had a very high fever and a lot of symptoms like pain, leg pain, headache, sore throat, cold, cough, everything. So I spent a few days, very bad days. But now it's okay. But I'm still home. Tomorrow I have my test. So my camera is broken. So I have my iPad and my computer, and I have to manage things here and there. So I'm not lucky as my colleagues who use that amazing room that we have at Crimedim, that some of you also seen in April. But I'll do my best. Oh, but why? I removed the waiting rooms earlier. I don't know. But please, again, if I don't see some requests, take care. I will. So yeah, hopefully I won't start coughing. Hi, Abdiel. Hello. Carlos is also joining. So I hopefully Monday. I don't know if you perceive that, but Monday it was very hard for me to talk. My voice was super tired. Now it's much better. So I'll do my best. Great. So at a certain point you may see tissues or stuff like that, but it will be okay. Okay, guys, I think that we can start. So I'll share my screen. Not like that. Wait. I'm not a big fan of technology, as you may see. Okay, now I do like that. Is that okay? Wait a second. Sorry. Ah, that's why. Okay, give me just a second. It's not working. Hello, Gilbert. Thank you for your message. I know, at least I know you are there. Okay, and now I want to do this. Oh, okay. I have some notes that I wanted to see. Great. Yes. Okay. So I see your faces here, my screen there. Okay, I think that I can manage the situation. Okay, guys, so Anytime you want to tell me something, ask me something, just share your thoughts, your perplexities, or whatever, just use the chat. I'm sorry if sometimes you will see my profile, because I will have a look on the chat here and on my the slides here, but we will manage in some way. So, gender and disasters. This is the topic of today's lecture. I'm very, very happy to deliver this lecture. I think that this is a very fascinating topic that really, really interests me. It's more or less 1 year that I started deal with this topic, so it's not a long time. But now, also with my PhD, I'm trying to deepen my knowledge on that as much as I can. Let's start. So, a couple of things about me. Okay, we already know each other, but just to recap my background, my expertise. So, you know that I'm Monica Trentin, and I'm also the project coordinator of TDMT. Why am I here? So, I got my bachelor degree in 2017 in international studies in Trento, in Italy. And the disaster word was completely out of my thoughts at that moment. But then, especially during my Erasmus experience in Slovenia, I started to study some interesting topics about security, international security, geopolitics, and that was very fascinating to me. But then a lot of things actually brought me in Verona, always in Italy. Maybe someone of you know Verona. Where Romeo and Julieta is that city. There is Giulietta's place in Verona. By the way, I studied there my master's degree in governance of emergency. So I studied how to manage emergencies and disasters from a managerial point of view, and I was in the law department, so I studied like constitutional law of emergencies and blah blah blah. Interestingly, I got my master's degree in October 2019. And a few months later, COVID happened. So all that things were very, very actual. So like the relationship between constitutional rights and the possibility to have restrictions for citizens and blah blah blah. So it was very, very interesting that after my graduation, in that field, a global pandemic happened, and I started working at Crimedim 1 week before the lockdown. So I worked 6 days, and then I stayed home 2 months in a new city, because I live 300 kilometers from Novara. Now I'm, of course, always in Novara, but it was a very interesting experience. And so in March 2020, I started my experience at Crimedim as a research fellow, and I used to do a little bit of everything, basically. So both in training, in management, not as in the management board of the center, but in like project management and so on, coordination of TDMT and disaster SEES. But then at a certain point, with Luca, we understood that research was something that could really, that could be the right path for me. And so I started focusing on research. with some little activities, some little contribution on my colleagues' manuscript and so on. And then in November 2021, I started my PhD in global health, humanitarian aid, and disaster medicine. It's an experience that I suggest to everybody of you that may be interested in research. And it's super interesting how so I always dreamed to be on the field and managing emergencies, and then I'm on the other side studying how to improve that response. So it's very interesting, and I really love our job here at Crimedim. So I have a project about disaster preparedness for vulnerable populations. In my PhD, I will involve a group of migrant women to understand how they used to prepare to disasters, which mechanisms are in place in their communities. Let's see if we will win a grant. In that case, we will study also the impact of COVID on that group. We will see, but these are the topics that really interest me. So preparedness for vulnerable populations, sexual health, sexual and reproductive health, and also everything within this, let's say, broad category, without making a bullet point of all the topics. So at Crimedim, I work both in research and in training. So I do different things. And I'm very happy to have this role within TDMT. It's very interesting to meet students from all over the world. I'm sorry that we cannot be in Novara all together, but it's a very fascinating experience. And I hope that for some of you, this path will open a lot of opportunities, and that maybe we can meet each other in Novara once in our life. Okay. After these presentations, now I think that we can go on details. So just to recap, okay, I'm sure that you all know very well at this point the definition of disaster, that is, according to the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, is a serious disruption of the functioning of a community. Clifford is joining. Or a society at any scale due to hazardous events interacting with conditions of exposure, vulnerability, and capacity, leading to one or more of the following: human, material, economic, and environmental losses and impact. This definition is very important, as you know, and interestingly, capacity was not always there. Capacity was added in 2016 to highlight the importance of people's ability to cope with disasters and its impact. So capacity is very important, and I'm showing you again this definition because today we will talk about gender and disasters, about women's vulnerability especially, and so we are in the field of I also have, wait, how does it work? Yeah, it's a bit slow, so I won't use it. Okay, by the way, we are in the field of the vulnerability, and I know that also Alessandro Lamberti mentioned that in his lecture. So this is the first question: can we define women as a vulnerable group? And I would really like to know your opinion on that. So if some of you can turn the mic on and maybe want. Oh, okay, we have already. Yes, please.
Well, I don't think that women generally can be defined as a vulnerable group, but rather like where are those women settling and how their financial level, their economic level, and their society overall, how the country is supporting the women, and overall, like you cannot say X is vulnerable unless you know all the circumstances around this X.
Thank you very much. I'm happy that we have a lot of hands raised. Okay, so Winston, please.
I just wanted to mention that I definitely agree with what Anas said. 100% women do experience many things that could make them more vulnerable, but I just thought it would be worth mentioning that I remember hearing about it from some other discussions from Scott, that it might be, I guess it's more accurate to describe the situations that people are in as making them vulnerable. So women are made vulnerable because of their conditions rather than being vulnerable themselves. Like women are, I guess, made vulnerable because of their conditions. So in terms of different countries in the world or at different disaster medicine situations, most certainly because of disadvantages or cultural reasons, certainly women can be disadvantaged in that way. And therefore, by saying that women can be made vulnerable or by their circumstances in disaster medicine. Yeah, just wanted to mention that.
Perfect, perfect. Super interesting comments. Natalie, please. And always correct me with the pronunciation of your names, please.
I think what I'm gonna say is gonna sound similar to what Inas already said, because I don't think we can say women are vulnerable, but it's more like how the society supports or like aggresses women, oppresses women. So under circumstances like in the Middle East, for example, we can say that, and all over the world in general, the fight against equality and the whole feminism movement is still working to make women like more equal and as they should be. So we can see by the numbers that have been shared in the lecture before that women are more susceptible to be impacted by disasters more, but that's because of how the society or country supports or does not support them.
Oh, I really like you guys like that. A lot of interesting feedback and comments. Great. So we have Rabbi.
Yeah, so I pretty much have the same thoughts in that it's not women as in gender that are truly vulnerable by nature. Women per se are not vulnerable. It's the society, it's how we treat them, it's how most of the societies, most of the communities are very much male dominated, and that's what marginalizes them in the first place. That's what makes them very much vulnerable, and that is basically me just pointing out how important this feminism movement is in itself. It's just about making women less vulnerable by giving them what they deserve in a society as a respectful members of the society in itself.
Thank you very, very much for your comment. Super interesting and all right. Kritika, not sure about the pronunciation.
Yeah,
Hello.
it's Kritika.
Oh, okay. Hello, hello. Where are you from?
I'm from India.
Okay.
I'm from this place called Assam. It's a state in the northeastern part of India.
Great. Sometimes I'll ask because I don't remember for everybody. Okay, so I'm curious to hear from you.
Yeah, so I completely agree with what the previous speakers had to add in. I do believe that it would be wrong to generalize women into the vulnerable group. However, the community that they belong to, their religious beliefs, coupled with the perspective of the people around them, do at times push them towards vulnerability. For example, in India, there are a lot of places where women are not like, they don't have equal access to even healthcare facilities, even during normal times, which further gets exaggerated during emergencies or during disaster. So it is, I would say it's somewhere in between. Like, I mean, you cannot completely say that women are not vulnerable, whereas you also cannot completely say that women are vulnerable. So I think it lies somewhere in between, depending on their country's origin, their religious beliefs, their community, and their cultural beliefs. So yeah, thank you.
Thank to you. Thank to you. So let's see. I don't see other hands, but if someone has something to add, please. Okay, so let's recap. I took some notes of some interesting words that I heard from you guys. Thank you very much for joining me in this. So society, many of you mentioned society, conditions, disadvantages, how the society support inequality, circumstances, society again, communities, male-dominated religious beliefs. So all these things are totally correct. All your comments are totally correct. So, of course, when now I will mention women's vulnerability, please keep in mind that it's because I'm teaching. So of course, sometimes we need to generalize, but all the things you said are correctly. It's wrong to say that in general. So first of all, they are not vulnerable per se, because they have some physical weakness or something like that, not at all. But of course, it's because of all the reasons you mentioned. So how the society shapes roles within that. But I don't want to anticipate too many things. But first of all, we have to recap and to keep in mind very well the definition of vulnerability. So when it comes to disasters, we say that vulnerability is the diminished capacity of an individual or group to anticipate, cope with, resist, and recover from the impact of a natural hazard. So what can we say? That although disasters threaten all the people who suffer from them equally, so all disasters treated everybody equally, sorry, so they just happen, okay, but the impact on people, they do not affect all the members of societies in the same way. So this depends on what? On gender dynamics within the society, as we will see in a minute. So keep in mind that when we talk about vulnerability, gender is one of the main social determinants of vulnerability, together with the ethnicity, with the age, of course, but gender is one of the main components of that. And that's why we can definitely say that women used to face, of course, now I have to generalize, but keep in mind what we have just said, that women used to face a double disaster, a disaster within the disasters, within the disaster. So, as I was mentioning, disasters are gender neutral. They just happened. They do not know where, when, day or night, if they hit an hospital or a school or a desert. They just happen. Unfortunately, we are seeing disaster day by day, every day more. But of course, they are gender neutral. So what's happened then? Why we can talk about women's vulnerability. So I really, really like this framework. So you know that frameworks are simple representations of complex reality. So they do not want to underestimate the weight of certain elements, but it's just a way to represent phenomenon, and it's very, very useful. And I really would like you to have a look on these frameworks. So we have this orange layer circle. So disaster impacts depend, as you can see, on the hazard type. So you know that hazard can be biological, can be geological, and so on. Its intensity, and who and what is exposed. So the exposure of infrastructures, how many people, and so on. So I think that also my colleague Alessandro clarified these aspects earlier. And of course, disaster impacts depend on the level of vulnerability of people and the coping capacity of these people. So all these factors that you can see here. So gender inequality, instead, the violet circle, arises from what? From the expected roles, some of you mentioned these things, the expected roles of men and women in a society. And all these expected roles influence a lot of things. They influence the socioeconomic status of women and males, their level of agency, the way men and women prepare for, react to, are impacted by, and recover from disasters. So in the overlay area here in the middle, between gender inequality and disaster impacts are all those factors that drive disaster impacts and are influenced by gender dynamics. So it's in that area, in this overlay area, I don't know if it's purple or maroon probably, we have gender differentiated impacts of disasters. In this area, these different impacts are generated. That in turn, what do they do? In turn, they can exacerbate, as the last speaker also clearly mentioned, they exacerbate gender inequality by influencing all those aspects that generate gender inequality, equality, sorry. So let's make a concrete example. If in a country women used to have to experience a lack of access to bank accounts, because in many countries it's like that, women will hold a larger share of their assets in a tangible form. So jewels, probably money, and so on. So you can imagine how they are at greater risk of losing their assets when a disaster comes. Because if an earthquake happens or a flood happens, and they have all their resources in a tangible form because they cannot access bank accounts, of course, in this case, they are at greater risk as women because of this inequality in accessing bank accounts. So it's very, very simple example, but reveals a lot on that. And of course, this is a vicious cycle, because if we have gender inequality that affects the impact of disasters, making, of course, women more vulnerable than before, because all their conditions will be exacerbated, they will be less capable, less prepared for the next disasters. So it's a vicious cycle, it's never ending, basically, no? So what can we do? We have to intervene in the overlay maroon area, where you can see disaster risk management. It's in that area that scientific community, global health leaders, all the disaster risk management policies on disaster risk management, there they have to intervene. So of course, as some of you mentioned, the circumstances, the communities, the country, the society, taking into consideration the different conditions that women experience. Okay, so of course we cannot say that okay, this intervention will work everywhere for reducing gender inequality. No, of course we have to go into the field and to understand the context and then work in that area. So we can, of course, I'm always generalizing. And another very important thing, so some of you also mentioned religious and cultural beliefs. So now when I will explore this topic, of course, it's science. I mean, I'm just sharing the evidence, making some example, but of course, it's out of my scope to make some criticism to some beliefs, some cultural attitude. So that's I really want to highlight that. I'm just reporting facts, evidence about gender and disasters, but of course without judging any religious behavior or belief. So this, please keep in mind that. So yes, we can say that women are that women are vulnerable in general, and this is something that was recognized by many international frameworks. So in terms of disasters framework, we have the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction 2015-2030. Very interesting. I suggest you to have a look on that. It's very easy to read, so everyone can easily do that. Where this gender dimension of disasters was recognized. And also, of course, in the Sustainable Development Goals, in the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development, and also by the Agenda of Humanity, before the Sendai framework, the Yogo framework. So a lot of international frameworks are emphasizing this vulnerability. And also the literature, the scientific literature, and also the gray literature, of course. So we have every day more papers coming out on these topics. We have, as I was mentioning, scientific literature, but a lot of reports. So when I mention gray literature, I mean reports from the UN, from the World Bank. Everything that is not peer-reviewed is not a scientific publication. But we have a lot of reports on that. But it's, I wouldn't say a new topic, but it's quite recent, because if you think that in 1996, actually this interest began, it's 25 years. So, I mean, less than 30 years. So it's not new, but if we compare this topic with a lot of other topics, always in the field of disasters and emergency, you will see that it's definitely more recent. So in 1996, the first scientific work on that was published by Alice Fothergill. So she published a literature review on women and disasters, but at that time the chosen approach was the psychological one. So how women and men differently deal with disasters, no, from a psychological point of view. Then in 1996, so a few months, if I'm not wrong, a few months later, another interesting publication was published, Women and Floods in Bangladesh. So in this case, a specific disaster was explored. So was explored the relationship between women and in this case floods. And then in 1999, a special issue on gender was opened in the International Journal of Mass Emergencies and Disasters. But there were a lot of issues at the time. Why? First of all, whatever the discipline, at that time, the objective was just to make women visible, because women were considered weak, not weak, probably not weak, but like passive, or they deserve some attention. No? So there was this all the spotlight on these topics, just to make women visible, to talk about them, because they weren't considered. So just let's talk about women. So usually it's this is not the best way to deal with some topic, no? So just because you want to give visibility and you start talking, the quality, of course, can also be affected, as you can imagine. And the other problem that sometimes we still have is that for Western scholars, it was someone else's problem. So women were probably more in need according to this perspective, they were more in need in some less developed country. And so that wasn't a problem for the Western scholars. They could work on something else, no? So, or they could work on this topic, but without considering their own societies. And this is a very common mistake. But now I would like to make some examples. So what do we mean by women's vulnerability, no? And how they are vulnerable when they are actually vulnerable throughout all the disaster cycle. So I'm sure that you are also that you already familiarized with this cycle. So we have the preparedness, the mitigation, the preparedness, the response, and the recovery, and then again mitigation and so on. And we can see different examples of vulnerability when it comes to women and disasters throughout all these different phases. So, for example, let's talk about the early warning system. So the early warning system is something related to the preparedness, of course, no? So we have these systems that tell us if a disaster is expected, no? Or better, if a hazard is expected. So early warning systems, we know the literature tells us that warning information are usually transmitted by men to men in a lot of contexts, in a lot of countries, in public spaces, rarely reaching women. And we will see this better in a few minutes. Always in the field of preparedness, we know that women often do not participate in training activities, that the training activity is something that usually the man does in the family, no? And interestingly, the literature suggests that part of the reason why the city of La Masica in Honduras reported no deaths after the Hurricane Mitch lays with the fact that women had been educated in the early warning systems, and they were also in charge of the early warning systems. So when women are involved, they can also, of course, they develop coping mechanisms for themselves, but also for all the other women that could be, let's say, be less considered in case of disasters. Another aspect is that the impact of disasters is typically measured through material losses. So we also mentioned that earlier. So if a loss is, if the impact of disaster is measured only considering material losses, you can imagine that a woman, especially if she loses the husband during the disaster, how can she claim some right on her property? This is very, very common. And then we are now in the response. Women also face a lot deterioration in the reproductive and sexual health. So they may experience increase in unwanted pregnancies, issues in breastfeeding, and so on. Also premature deliveries. For example, young women used to experience very long menstrual cycles and related weakness due to the lost blood, or due to the severe stress. Lactating mothers can have issues, serious issues in the breastfeeding because the milk secretion decreases. Family planning services can be interrupted. So also the access to contraception is reduced. So of course, everything is then connected with other issues now. So and access to care is very complicated. So a lot of problems. And then to mention something else, the gender gap when it comes to access to internet and to mobile phones. And if we mention the recovery now, unfortunately, unfortunately, relief and rehabilitation services do not reach women as quickly as they reach men, and often women receive less benefits than men. Of course, even now, I'm just generalizing because it's a presentation, very broad, very basic. It's an introduction to the topic, but of course this doesn't happen everywhere, anytime, but there is evidence enough that makes show that this is a problem. So we should talk about that. Another problem is related to the disaster mortality. Since women are often disproportionately affected, and in some cases they are up to 9 times more likely to die during disaster. So this graph shows data from, it's from the World Bank. Oh, I didn't put the source, I'm sorry. Yeah, but this graph shows data from 7 disasters around the world. Sorry, not around the world, from Asia, where sex and age disaggregated data were available. And you can see how women were up to 9 times more likely to die, especially in the flood Solomon in 2014. So then there were also the children, but if you consider the Bangladesh cyclone in 1991 that we will see in a minute, so all of them can be a good example of this. And to make another reference, another study covering 141 countries from, so disasters happened in those countries from 1981 to 2002, demonstrated how disasters caused by natural hazard lower women's life expectancy more than men, either directly because disasters kill women more than men, or indirectly because they kill them at an earlier stage due to all the economic impacts and the higher morbidity. So just to mention you some other example. After the 2004 South Asian tsunami, women, and this is a quote from the literature, women were seen just as child producing machines. So there is a typo, I'm sorry. Why? Because cases were reported where women who had previously undergone tubectomies were surgically recanalized to enable conception and childbirth. So this is, very also hard to hear. When I read this thing, I was quite shocked. So in that case, women lost any right on their body, and they were severely stigmatized and lived under severe threats, because if they could not deliver another baby, preferable male, I also have to add, their husbands would have remarried. Okay, so they were at risk because they could lose everything from a day to the other. No, so this is a very, very terrible example. And now I really like this case study. Again, I don't want to interfere with any religious belief, just reporting evidence. Why I really like this? Why do I like this case study? For a researcher interested in this topic, so gender and disasters, you will definitely at a certain point arrive at this paper. Not only this paper that we will discuss now, but at this event, because this was also visible in the graph. This is a very interesting case to explore women's vulnerability to disasters. It's that happened in 30 years ago, but it's still super useful to understand this topic. This is definitely one of the most cited cases in the literature. Even if there is some disagreement on how things went, to be honest, but now I will explain you why. So what happened on the night of April 29, 1991, of course, the southeastern coastal areas of on the Bay of Bengal in Bangladesh were hit by a super severe cyclone. With a tidal surge that submerged about 160 kilometers of the southeastern coastline and coastal islands on the Bay of Bengal. So it was a huge disaster. 130,000 people killed. Even if someone speculates that the death toll could be higher because of many unregistered people. So huge disaster. And if you have a look on this graph, you can see how female mortality rates were much higher than the male rates in most age groups. So women died more because of the cyclone, than, except the younger, of course, that also because of physical characteristics did not survive, unfortunately. But if we stay on the female rate, you can see that there is an important difference among males and females. But why? So there is this very nice publication that I will explore a bit now. All the references are at the end, by the way. So if you are also interested, you can consult them. But what happens that this researcher conducted a literature review. What does it mean? Basically, she took all the publications about the topic, she read them, she studied them, she explored them, and then she wrote an article putting all together, like making a big summary of the evidence gained. It's a very common type of work for researchers. I'm also conducting a literature review for my PhD. Alessandro Lamberti just submitted his review for the PhD. So almost every PhD student starts his PhD by conducting a review of the literature to understand what's there about the topics they want to explore. So I'm conducting a review about migrant women's vulnerability to disasters, and literature is very scarce on that. By the way, back to us. So this researcher conducted a review to understand which evidence was available on this. And many of them, many of the studies that she found, agreed that the excessive female mortality rate was due to the gender-specific dynamics, especially when it comes to women's spatial mobility, because of the norm of Purda. So what's Purda? It's a religious and social practice prevalent among some Muslim communities, not for all Muslims, some specific communities. What does it mean, Purda? Purda literally means a curtain. So it's used, this word, to this expression, to indicate the separated spaces that women and men occupy, and because of it, women are they used to stay in this space called bari, so they are not exposed to non-related adult men, so not parents, not relatives, sorry, and not the husband, and they seldom go out without being escorted from a male family member. So a lot of researchers agree on that Purda, the norm of Purda is one of the most important reasons to explain these different rates. Why? So, for example, women hesitated to leave the bari for safer places because of Purda. They were like reluctant to leave their place, to leave alone their house. And these quotes are very, very interesting. They all come from survivors, from interviews conducted by researchers. So this quote is from a man, an husband, who said, "She, Moina, was a good woman. She did not venture out of the house alone." So, and this shows also how husbands agreed on that on that practice, no? So this is the rule. Despite the flood, you can't go out alone. So it was very, very. I forgot to mention something. I just talked about the A graph. Later, I will go back to graph B. Then women always according to this. Let me check the time. Okay, it's already late. Women were housebound, so they were responsible for cattle and valuables. Jasmine is here. So this is another interesting quote. I asked a woman, but why, this is the researcher, why did you not leave the house when everybody else left? She answered shyly with a guilty look, I stayed to save my chicken. And again, women were also responsible for children. A man is a man, but what I am without my children. Another reason is that women wore the sari. The sari is a garment that symbolizes the chastity and modesty of women, and is very, very, I mean, heavy also, no? So this garment hampers quick movement, as you can imagine, especially in water. So it's not difficult to expect how the sari prevented the women from swimming and running very, very fast. And it's reported that most women who survived either discarded the sari themselves or the strong current pulled it off, because they could not run, they could not escape. No? And another aspect is that women suffered more from malnutrition and ill health than men. And therefore it was harder for them to endure the storm and the huge surge of water, very, very huge surge of water. Now remember that we are in 1991, but at that time in Bangladesh, a girl child used to get the 20% less calories than a girl child used to have the oh my God, 20% less of calories than a boy child, due to the unequal food distribution in the family. No? So you can imagine that they grew physically fragile and also mentally fragile. You need to have a huge mental and physical strength to face such a disaster. No? So all these things made researchers agree on the fact that for these for the norm of Purda and all these other aspects, cultural and religious aspects, women died more. And coming back to that graph, you can see in the graph B how, sorry, I have to hide your faces. The rural area of Bangladesh here, it's represented. So according to also to the geographical position, the impact was different. So in the rural area, the Purda was much more practiced. So there is also this aspect to consider, the geographical aspect. And also for these researchers were quite sure that Purda could have a role on that. But according to Ikeda, this researcher that conducted the review, it's dangerous to uncritically accept Purda as the reason why that happened. But because regardless the sex, she said, almost no one evacuated before the surge, but there were significant differences regarding the warnings, the access to warning systems and preparedness. So men in general paid more attention to the information on the cyclone, and in general men knew much more where they could find the shelters and the safe buildings. So women, since they always go out if they are escorted, they didn't know where these places were. So of course, there was a lack, a disparity in the information access. While she did not find remarkable differences in behavior between women and men regarding the protection of children, cattle, and valuables. So what's important to say that it's important to say that we can't so the reality is much more complex than this, no? So we can say that, okay, Purda caused all this, that cultural belief caused all that. It's much more complex, but still, they are signals, okay? And when we write a preparedness plan, an evacuation plan, when we train people, when we make research, we have to consider all these aspects to improve the preparation, to improve our ability to face a disaster. So if we know that even if Purda is not the cause of this event, of this impact, no? Let's say that Purda has anything to do with that. But still, if we know that there is Purda and we know that women could be reluctant to go out alone, we have to find a way to we have to find a way to prepare some interventions. So like some I don't know it's not on me luckily, because it's very hard topic, but policymakers or experts in disaster risk reduction have to do something, because we cannot accept that women do not escape because they are alone. That's unacceptable, no? So there is Purda. As I was saying, we don't judge the practice, but we take it into consideration and we do something about it. So time is also running out. So I will go quick. And probably I will also cut something. Disasters and violence against women. So there is plenty of evidence that violence tends to increase in the immediate aftermath of a disaster. So there are findings after Haiti earthquake, after Hurricane Katrina, after the Hurricane Mitch, after the eruption of Mount St. Helens, after the South Asian tsunami. So, and when we mention violence against women, we mention sexual exploitation, we mention the fact that women and girls, especially girls, are often forced to provide sexual favors in return for food and benefits. This is unacceptable. We, especially during the pandemics in general, and also with the last pandemic that is COVID, we have a lot of reports on incidents of intimate partner violence and gender-based violence that increased globally during Ebola, during Zika, during COVID, as I was saying. So these findings definitely reveal us that there is a trend. So again, we don't generalize, we don't say that it's like that everywhere, anytime, but these are trends, and we can't underestimate these trends. So, of course, consequences of these are fractures and bleeding, central nervous system disorder, psychological disorders, sexual and reproductive health issues like HIV, sexual dysfunction, unwanted pregnancies, and so on. And of course, what makes the situation worse is that access to healthcare in this case is compromised. So I was saying that I'm conducting this review about migrant women, and in many articles I found how women couldn't participate in even non-migrant women, but they couldn't participate in psychological support groups for violent for survivors of violence, and they couldn't ask for help because of the language barrier. So especially during COVID, this was a very huge issue. And here I reported some data about these rapid gender assessment survey conducted in 13 countries, and this report was published by UN Women on November 2021 for the International Day for violence against women. I won't talk about that because it's already late, but data are very significant on that. So sorry for some typo also here. 45% of women reported that they or a woman they know has experienced a form of violence against women since COVID-19 started. 4 in 10 women feel more unsafe in public space than before COVID. So that's of course a big problem. And I also wanted to mention the importance of building back better. So the disasters, of course, are never positive, but disaster. Wait, I don't see you anymore. Okay, here you are. Of course, disasters are never positive, but disaster reconstruction, disaster recovery is an opportunity to build back better. So the building back better theory, let's say, it's emphasized by the Sendai framework. So every time that we have to, of course you are much aware about that because of COVID. So we always mention this build back better. So it's a philosophy, no? After a disaster, we recover better. So more resilient, more able to cope. We reconstruct our places, our home in a better way, more functional, safer, and so on. And disaster recovery is an opportunity to build back better in a way that breaks down the constraint faced by women. So for example, this is an interesting example. After the 2004 South Asian tsunami, Indonesia's reconstruction of Aceh Land Administration System project, for sure the pronunciation was not correct, introduced for the first time the option of jointly registering land. And by doing that, they increased the proportion of titles issued jointly from 4% to 45% in 4 years. So as I was saying, when women don't have any right on their property, they risk to lose everything during a disaster, after a disaster, no? So if and this happened during the tsunami, because because the lands were usually the properties were usually issued only for the men. But with this revolution, with this new law, they could also claim their rights on that, and this is extremely important. But before concluding, I want to say something very important. So, focusing only on women gives us a partial picture. So, of course, we also now saw some trends, okay? And of course, gender, I mean, women's vulnerability is an important thing to take into consideration. We cannot compare if we have a look around the globe and if we consider very different disasters in different times, we have a trend, okay? But in some circumstances, also men might be vulnerable. But there are very limited studies that explore this. So I make you an example. There is this refugee camp in Western Ethiopia that accepted refugees from other countries. And now I don't remember, so I don't want to say something wrong, but neighboring countries, okay, that were fleeing their countries, and they reached safety in Ethiopia, in Western Ethiopia, in this refugee camp, okay. There was food, there was sanitation, of course, it's a refugee camp, but the living condition was acceptable, okay. What happened? That after a few weeks, they saw that the morbidity and mortality in that camp, the rates of morbidity and mortality remained very high. So there was something wrong in this camp. So why? They have food, they have water, they have toilets. What's going on? You know what was going wrong? Males could not cook. They didn't have any culinary skills because in their own countries, they didn't used to cook because it was something that women usually do, no? Women used to cook. So men did not, they weren't able to cook. So when they arrived in this refugee camp where everybody had to cook for themselves, they received some, I don't remember what kind of food, but they received some food that had to be cooked. They didn't cook this food, and so they had health issues. So in this case, you can see that males were also vulnerable. And what I want to say with this, what do I mean? That we have to know the reality when we plan some interventions, because in some cases, we don't have to give for granted that males are not vulnerable. That's the point. Also, men can be vulnerable, okay? And finally, we have also sometimes, not sometimes, very often, the sexual and gender minorities face a lot of issues in disasters. And there is very poor literature on sexual and gender minorities in disasters. And personally, I would really like to study these, to go to the field. I don't know, but this is very interesting to me. There's been a partial change in the direction in the last 10 years. So we have some studies, some report, but very scarce very, very scarce literature on that. And we can say that usually there is either an unequal impact of disaster on these gender and sexual minorities, or that there are discriminatory practices of disaster risk reduction that negatively affect these persons. And very, very quick, super quick, because it's late. Oh my God, it's super late. Sorry, guys. If you need to go, please don't worry. But I would like just to finish with these examples. So the example of the waria. Waria in Indonesia, we are in Indonesia. Waria is the contraction of wanita, that means woman, and priya, that means men. So we have biologically male individuals who adopt typically feminine features and identity. What happens? That in 2010, we have a volcano eruption, Mount Merapi volcano eruption, important disasters, and this disaster affected many, many waria. What happened? This waria, this community was super afraid of facing discrimination in the evacuation sites, in the shelters, and therefore a lot of them preferred to ask to some friends to have support, because they were super scared to go in these evacuation sites because of the discrimination that they used to experience from people. Because in general, the list to enter these shelters were divided only in women and women and men, girls and boys. So if you say that biologically you are a male, but you feel a woman, you can enter in the shelter as a woman, but you don't want to enter as a man. So basically you couldn't enter. And in the cases when they entered because of the biological sex, they faced a lot of discrimination and hostility from the other people in the site. And that's why I always like to mention this example. At a certain point, things changed. So at the beginning, everyone was reluctant to have these people in the shelter. They were super hostile with them, super impolite, very, very terrible attitude towards them. But at a certain point, the waria community started to do what they used to do as in their professional life. So haircut and makeup. They were very good at that. So they started to provide for free this service in the shelters. And then after that, people started to judge them differently, to see them as friends. Why? Because they how can I say, gave importance to a very basic human need. So the need to be nice, to have the hair done, to be clean, to have our hair clean. So you can imagine you are in a shelter, you have limited access to service, to toilet, and blah blah blah. So they started for free with their own hands to make haircuts to the people, and so this is super interesting, because despite the discrimination suffered, they actually showed a huge disaster-related capacity capacity to take into consideration a basic human need, and trying to improve the life in the shelter that you can imagine is very, very hard. And also, moreover, they organized a drag queen contest to collect money to support other shelters. So they were super involved in the post-disaster management, let's say, activities, initiatives. So they showed a wide array of ideas. They were super involved in all these activities, and actually they did very, very well. But still, they used to face a lot of discrimination in their society, and in the preparedness plan, in any point was mentioned the Waria community, how the Waria community can support in case of disaster, and usually also in other countries, sexual minorities are or abandoned, left to fend for themselves, or used just to clean the roads and these things. So there is a lot of discrimination, and unfortunately, even if now we are studying more and more women's vulnerability, there is a lot of efforts to make to explore also other kinds of gender vulnerability. So males, as I mentioned, and sexual and gender minorities. So now I don't want to talk a lot, because I could make other examples, but I will finish it here. But if you want, there is this nice paper on sexual minorities, in the references list. But keep in mind that there is still, I mean, the efforts to do are a lot, and it's not just a matter of women, but there are a lot of things to consider. So I know that you are medical doctors, not almost, medical students, and probably for you these things are quite distant. So yesterday you had a lecture on pre-hospital, and you made a simulation, then you will have a lot of lectures very specific for your professional career. But I really hope that you could learn something more today, that now you have some awareness more on these topics, if not as medical doctors, as citizens, as students, as persons. So, and I really recommend you, if in your career you will go on the field to work, to respond to some disasters, please keep in mind all these things when you respond to that event. So yes, now I promise that I finish. So here you have the references. I will upload everything. So this is the paper about sexual minorities. This Gaillard, Beyond Men and Women, a Critical Perspective. Yeah, so I stop sharing and I stop talking. I would really like to open the space for discussions, but I think that you will, that you also wish to go. I know that for some of you it's quite late, so you maybe want to go to bed. But still, I'm available anytime. So no, if you have questions, please. If you want to go because it's late or you have other appointments, please. No worries. Yes, I hope you enjoyed this section. So I hope that once, so I mean, a waste of time, of time. I know that you're medical students, but I hope that still you could have some input and that you learn something. I mean, TDMT wants to be interdisciplinary and wants to open you a lot of yeah, doors. Oh, thank you guys. The session was very eye-opening. Thank you. Thank you. I'm super happy you like it. So, and despite COVID, yeah, not issues, just candy at a certain point. But yeah, okay, guys, so please reach me out anytime. One minute, thank you so much. Get well, yes. Hopefully I will be negative tomorrow. Hopefully, let's hope, let's hope. Yes, so anytime, please ask me questions. Again, coming back to what I said at the beginning, I really don't want to be rude with you guys, but it's very, very nice if we can interact with you. So I really enjoyed when you made comments, that you are using the chat. I love to see your faces. So please keep in mind that. I will also write on the forum. We all together can make this experience nice, even if only in Zoom. I hate Zoom. I know that everyone hates Zoom at this point after 2 years, but this is the situation. So guys, thank you very much for your attention. It's been a real pleasure, and have a nice day, dinner, night, whatever. And I'll see you when is the next, not tomorrow, Friday, I think. Yeah, by the way, I'll see you soon, and enjoy your time. Bye guys, ciao. Bye from Italy, ciao ciao.